With a number of COVID-19 cases on the rise throughout the state of Texas, there have been more and more requests regarding the upcoming school year. While we still don't have all the answers, we'll be publishing episodes weekly to provide what information we do have and keep you updated on the 2021 school year. I'm Andrew Kim, Superintendent of Schools for the Comal Independent School District. Joining me today is our Executive Director, Joe McKenna, our regular partner in this podcast. And we also have a special guest here today, coordinator for the Student Support Services as well, working with Joe McKenna, is Ruby Moseley. So thanks for joining me today here. I appreciate it very much. We're going to talk a lot today about case management, because I think that's going to be one of the big hot topics that's going to occur when school opens up for all school districts out there, even for us and everybody else. Because the reality is we are going to have cases, whether it's through exposure or potential symptoms or positive cases. So first and foremost, what's the formal sort of system that we have in place in Comal ISD?
Yeah, sure. So our case management process has several different components, if you will. The first is certainly we need the ability to get information from staff or students who may fall into one of those buckets that have to be case managed.
And what are the three buckets?
Just as a reminder, there's three buckets. One, you're lab confirmed positive, meaning you have tested positive for the virus, either with your PCP or at a lab testing site. The second one is you've been exposed to someone who's positive, and exposure is specifically defined as being within 6 feet for 15 cumulative minutes. And then the last one is you're experiencing symptoms consistent with the virus. And that symptoms list does change recently very frequently. Just as people learn more about the virus, they adjust those. So those
you mean like CDC has changed on some of those?
Correct. Yeah. So as those, scientists and medical professionals learn more about the virus, they adjust the symptoms list. And even deeper for medical professionals like our nurses, right? They're learning these are higher level symptoms. These are lower level. These clusters of symptoms together are more likely to be the virus.
Yeah, it's crazy in terms of keeping up with all of that.
Yeah, lots of detail.
Let me ask you this. Don't you think, let me just stop you right there and just say this. Don't you think that we're going to have more, we're going to deal with more issues or symptoms rather than positive cases? Because right now, the number of tests, people getting tested are dropping in the state of Texas as we speak today. So, but we are going to have a lot of people just saying, "Hey, I got a little headache today.
Mm-hmm.
I got a little fever today."
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens? I mean, how do we case? I mean, what I'm saying is we're going to deal with more of those symptoms issues, and then potentially exposure to those symptoms issues, and really the positive cases may come way after that.
Sure. Yeah, I think experiencing symptoms. So we don't necessarily deal with exposure to symptoms until we know it's the virus, because there's so many other illnesses, viruses that could have similar symptoms. So you could have, for instance, we've seen several cases that were, sore throat, ended up being strep throat, or ended up being a sinus infection. So there are many other viruses, illnesses that have consistent symptoms. So our nurses, really have been trained to a much deeper level to try to understand those clusters of symptoms. The best thing we're going to do is if you're experiencing symptoms, we're really going to say you probably need to go see your doctor, let your doctor do a true medical diagnosis and determine if testing is appropriate.
Joe, though, and Ruby, is it something that we need to err on the side of?
Absolutely.
Where if you have shown some symptoms, like I'm fatigued, mm-hmm. or I got a headache, or whatever, should we just default to, at this particular point right now until the pandemic is over, that it could be COVID-19 virus?
So again, your nurses, your medical professionals, if you go see your doctor, if you have a slight cough, and let's say it's more of a wet cough, that's really not consistent with the virus. Virus is more of a dry cough. But yes, we want to err on the side of caution, because worst case would be you may experiencing symptoms. If you do become positive, then that's when all those close contacts become, right? So that could impact a larger group of people. So
in some sense, I mean, and we're not even get to the case management yet, but if I'm at a home and my son or my daughter is kind of feeling fatigued today, then I should probably keep them at home.
I think in this, where we are right now, that from a parent standpoint, that would be on the side of caution to make sure that we don't impact a greater number of folks in the building. Absolutely. Consult your doctor.
And I know that's a very hardship on many parents out there because they may have to go to work and they may not have enough days to take off to do that. So we definitely understand that issue. But boy, I tell you what, I think until we see a vaccine, some clarification about all of this stuff of the pandemic, we're going to have to wrestle with that a little bit. So, but let's just, let me just say though, let's just say I come to you and say, hey, listen, I'm here in school today, but man, I'm like, man, I got the chills. I don't feel good. So now I'm going to be case managed. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So especially if you get chills, we're certainly going to take care of that and case manage that. So our nurses, again, we have areas on campus where we'll be able to move that student.
So I'll be isolated to an isolation room.
Correct. So we have appropriate equipment for our nurses, any other staff that would have to be in there with the child. Well, we're certainly caring for them. Reach out to the parents. Again, we're going to give that.
So my mom comes and picks me up.
Correct.
And then what? Then let's just say right now, it's still, I'm not going to go get a test.
And so that's one of the possibilities, right? We could suggest going to see your doctor and get a test. If a family chooses not to, if you're experiencing symptoms, we presume that you're positive. So there's those 3 criteria to come back.
So if you presume me, so I say, hey, we're not going to get a test. So then you presume that I have the COVID-19 virus.
Using the return criteria. So you would basically have the same criteria to come back to our building as if you were actually lab confirmed positive.
Which is 14 days quarantine.
It's actually, it sounds when I say it less restrictive, but it actually in the long run is more. So it's 10 days from the first time you experiencing symptoms, 24 hours, no fever, and improvement of symptoms. What we've seen, and Ruby can talk a little bit about this too, in our cases, improvement of symptoms doesn't happen right away, right? So it's actually longer. It's closer to 14, 15 days. But
the general rule is about 14 days.
Correct.
I think,
Correct.
Right? So then 14 days later, so I basically become a remote student, kind of take care of things at home now, log in and all that good stuff. And then 14 days later, I come. But what about my classmates I was sitting around?
Sure. So unless you become positive, unless you're true lab confirmed positive, if you are lab confirmed positive and we have, again, that exposure to a positive, that 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, those students would then be on a 14-day quarantine as well.
But if I'm not positive, meaning I don't get a test,
then there's no return criteria for those students who are around me for just symptoms alone.
I know, but do they get case managed and go home?
They do not.
They do not.
They do not. The state removed any mention of experiencing close contacts to symptoms because they weren't seeing, unless you test positive, there's no real.
But doesn't that defeat the purpose though a little bit? Should we get I mean, there's some debate about whether or not I should get tested or not.
Sure.
Right? So if I'm not saying no, we're not going to get tested, then are we just letting things maybe perhaps get out of control there a little bit, or how would that work?
I mean, we're certainly going to manage that, and that part of our communication is that class is still going to get some notification that this student went home experiencing symptoms. You should pay close attention
to your child,
even though you may not be by definition a close contact. You should pay close attention to perhaps your child does get some fatigue, and normally you may dismiss that as, they're in strength and conditioning or athletics. You may pay a little bit more close attention to that and say, okay, I may need to do something different with this situation.
And then the general campus would get a general notification about something going on to the symptomatic about what's happened with this one kid named Andrew.
Sure. And
obviously the name won't be shared.
No. And that's where our district dashboard really comes into play. Is all of our active cases in the district, and it's by those 3 buckets, and it's by campus.
So so me being quarantined by symptom does not necessarily constitute a positive case.
Correct.
It could be.
It could be. For your ability to come back to the building, we treat it as a positive, right. but it's not counted as a true positive.
It could be a cold. It could be the common cold. It could be allergic reaction or something of that nature. I mean, we can't forget the fact that while we are very serious about the COVID-19 virus, there are other circumstances and health-related issues that we deal with annually with kids all the time that are happening.
And that's why, certainly on the more preventative end, we're still stressing, getting your appropriate immunizations. We're going to, we've actually moved up our timeline to get our staff flu clinics on campus. So we're going to push that to try to mitigate the confusion between perhaps some of these viruses that are going to be out there.
So let's just kind of go along with this hypothetical here. So I'm symptomatic, but I'm not going to get the test. I go home for 14 days because you're going to treat me like as if I'm COVID-19 case. The class that I'm part of, the 4th grade class, they get notified. Does that classroom get cleaned up though?
So anytime, part of our protocol, anytime we have someone who's experiencing symptoms or positive in the building, yes, in addition to the cleaning that's happening daily, preventative cleaning, there's also a response cleaning that will take place in that space. We really, through the case management process, identify all the spaces that student may have been when they were on campus showing symptoms to get those treated. Most of the time, we're able to take care of that pretty quickly, that afternoon, in the evening. If it were to be more widespread, this is where, as we've talked about before, there's the possibility that we may have to close down for a day if it is widespread throughout the building and we're going to have to clean. Or more days. Based on the amount of cleaning that would have to be done and where that student has been.
Right.
We're obviously trying to minimize that, with some other measures in place, but we have that ability should we need it.
And if I don't get a personal call though, just a letter, then our case management process is where, hey, when we look into this situation, we're only contacting the people who were exposed more than 15 minutes, close proximity at this particular point.
Correct.
Right?
And the reason for that is because you become part of the case management process now, right? So
if I was on the far side of the building or nowhere near, then you're just gonna get a general letter.
Correct.
What's going on status wise.
Correct.
I think a lot of parents are going to struggle with that, though, to be quite honest with you, because a lot of people are just going to be like, well, I was in the same building with them. And so we're going to have to deal with a lot of issues like that, I think.
I agree. And certainly as a parent myself, I have children in school and daycare. And you wonder. The only thing I can say is, our process is pretty extensive. And we're erring on the side of caution. If there's any chance that you were remotely likely to be in close contact, you're going to get a call from us.
Well, and to that, we've hired on extra staff going beyond just to do that work. The case management.
Yep.
So our district case management coordinator, we have specialists at the district level who are going to go out there and they're like the investigators, right?
That's their dedicated job is when we do have a case. I mean, certainly they're doing other things as well, but when there's a case, their job is to work with the campus to identify those close contacts.
Ruby, what are some of the things that you've been hearing as to, in terms of when we case manage, where the source of this situation, where it's people are coming to? I'm always wondering, right? So there's all these cases nationally, statewide, locally. And what's really not reported at all is where it's happening, because really contact tracing is really not happening to many degrees. So anecdotally, just for our kids, are you hearing differently? Like, I mean, I'm gonna say it. I've heard some birthday parties, family gatherings. I mean, what other places have you heard that unfortunately we trace some of those spread to?
Absolutely. Some of the majority of the cases that we're seeing are not coming from within our programs. They're coming from those weekend parties, the birthday parties, the club sports, traveling to other locations, and being brought into our schools, but fortunately not spreading within our student staff, the people that are around them.
And I think the good thing is our parents are alerting us as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be the key really to all of this stuff. I mean, we can have the best contact tracing or case management process, but if we don't get notified of information of what occurred off campus hours.
Absolutely. Our parents have been great about, one, completing the screener every day, especially with our strength and conditioning camps. When they're coming, they're making sure that's taken care of. But if their student goes home not feeling well, not sending them back.
Right.
They've been really good about notifying us, hey, they came home, they're not feeling good, we're taking them to get tested. So the communication so far has been phenomenal between our parents, and we really appreciate that because it allows us to get ahead of the case.
Yeah, that's going to be so crucial, and we're going to need to really rely on our parents to just, err on the side of the caution this year, at least until the vaccine arrives, and then certainly please just make sure that you help us out because, man, we do not want to create more issues as a result of that.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, listen, I appreciate both of you guys. I know you guys are doing a lot of work and taking a few minutes out of your day to meet with me on this podcast. I really do appreciate it. This case management is going to be a lot of work because we will have cases and we will need to deal with that. And I know there's always an initial shock. It's worrisome. We worry about it. We worry about the health of our teachers, health of our students, because this is something that's going to affect us all. And so, but the fact that we're going to be responsive to it, the fact that we want everybody to be part of the process, I think helps to some degree, we can control that. And so it's important for us to all involve. So I hope that that's been helpful to everybody. Well, listen, you've been listening to Comal ISD Radio today. Join us next time as we talk about perspectives about all of this from a student's voice. So listen to the podcast with student voices in mind. Thank you very much.